good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to continue our read through of the History Year by Year timeline book. We're going to read about the marvelous Middle Ages, 500 to 1450. Just some quick notes. As you might hear, I have one of my windows open. I know that's a big no-no in ASMR because I'm in a big city and you can hear some city sounds, but it's so hot. I know I've said that in my last few videos, but my little studio heats up to like 90 degrees Fahrenheit at night right now during this mini heat wave we're having. So I really don't want to get like heat stroke. So something's got to give. The window's going to be open, so you might hear some cars, some like ambient nighttime city noise. The BART train's probably going to go by in a bit and you'll hear it, but whatever. Some people are really into that. If that's not your thing, I do apologize. I promise I'll edit out the worst ones, but I'm trying not to like shrivel up like a little raisin in this. So anyway, that out of the way, let's read about the Middle Ages year by year. So we're starting off in the year 500. That's where we left off. And we're going to head over to the year 507, Frankish victory. Clovis, king of the Franks, defeated the Visigoths at the Battle of Vouillé and began to drive them out of southwest France into Spain. This 15th century painting shows Alaric II, the defeated Visigothic king, kneeling before Clovis. Let's move on to 529, monastic life. Benedict founded a monastery at Monte Cassino in Italy. He laid down rules for how the monks should live, dividing the day between prayer and work. Monasteries following Saint Benedict's rules spread across Europe and were centers of learning during the Dark Ages. And then in 532, there's a riot in Constantinople. Justinian, the Byzantine or Eastern Roman emperor, seemed in danger of losing his throne after rioting in Constantinople. However, the riot was crushed and the 30,000 rebels killed. 2 years later, that's a lot of rebels killed. 2 years later, Justinian's position was made even stronger when his general Belisarius retook North Africa from the Vandals. In the year 542, there's a plague. Dun, dun, dun. An outbreak of bubonic plague struck the city of Constantinople. It had broken out 2 years earlier in Egypt and spread around the Mediterranean, probably carried on grain ships by infected rats. The huge loss of life weakened the empire, and in particular the army, overstretched by Justinian's campaigns in Italy and North Africa. On to the year 553, the secret of silk. A silk-making industry developed in Constantinople with the arrival of the first silkworms. The insects were said to have been smuggled from Persia by 2 monks who hid them inside their hollow canes. Before this, silk had to be imported at great cost because the Chinese refused to reveal the secret of silk production. Then we move on to the year 570. We're finally out of Constantinople with the birth of Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca in what is now Saudi Arabia. A member of the minor Quraysh clan, he was orphaned at the age of 7 and brought up in the household of his uncle Abu Talib. At that time, the people of Arabia worshipped many gods. Then, what happens next in the year 581? China reunited. Emperor Wendy, founder of the Sui dynasty, made himself sole ruler of China, reuniting the country after 3 centuries of division and instability. Under his successor, Emperor Yangdi, work began on the 1,240-mile Grand Canal network. Linking the south and north of the country, it is still the longest canal system in the world. Then, 593, Buddhist prince. Prince Shotoku, one of Japan's great cultural heroes, became regent, ruling on behalf of his aunt, Empress Suiko. A devout Buddhist, Shotoku encouraged the spread of Buddhism, which became the state religion. He also created a document that set out the principles that should govern Japanese society. And then, in 597, Augustine's mission. After encountering a group of Anglo-Saxon slaves in a market, Pope Gregory I sent Augustine, a Roman churchman, to Britain to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. Augustine baptized King Ethelbert of Kent, whose wife was already a Christian, and founded a church at Canterbury. I think it talks about it down here, how he saw that they had like blonde hair, and he's like, wow, it's so cool. Again, like I always say, these little extra pages we're gonna read on another day. This book is really long, and today we're just gonna go through the timeline aspect and these tiny boxes too. So now we're in the year 600. We're gonna slide down to the year 606, Indian Empire. Harsha, king of a small Indian state, united the whole of northern India. Literature and culture flourished, but his empire broke up soon after his death in 647. Then over in 610, Greek replaces Latin. Heraclius became the Byzantine emperor, ruling until 641. He fought off the Persians, who were threatening to invade. Since most people in the Eastern Empire spoke Greek rather than Latin, he made it the official language of government. There he is. Moving on to 618, Tang takeover. Li Yuan, regent to the last Sui emperor, a boy, had him murdered and seized power for himself. He reigned as Gaozu, the first emperor of the Tang dynasty. In 626, Gaozu's son Taizong forced his father to step down. Taizong's reign was the start of a golden age in China. Then we go on to 637, Arab conquests. Following Muhammad's death in 632, the Arabs, united by Islam, embarked on a campaign of conquest. By 637, they had seized Jerusalem and Damascus from the Byzantine Empire, and soon they had conquered the Persian Empire. Syria, Palestine, and Egypt fell next, and by 698, they controlled the whole of North Africa. Let's see what's next. I'm going to skip all the way to the year 668, Golden Success. Syria conquered the neighboring kingdoms of Baekje and Goguryeo to take sole control of Korea. Syria had grown rich on gold. Its rulers, several of whom were women, were buried in tomb mounds with fabulous gold finery. Look at their crowns. Awesome. And next, in the year 673, Secret Weapon. I should say I do have a learning disability where I can't read numbers. I don't think I've ever talked about that on my channel, but I really have to stare at a number to make sure I read it right. Anyway, Secret Weapon. When Arab ships reached Constantinople, the Byzantines brought out a new weapon, bronze tubes that fired a strange liquid. Known as Greek fire, the liquid caught fire on the water and produced raging flames. The weapon repelled the Arabs and saved the city. And that's one of the great mysteries in history, is what exactly that was. Nobody knows, and modern science hasn't found a way to replicate it. So, what in the world? A sea fire which ignited the Arab ships and burned them with all hands. Yeah, nobody knows how that was done. It is a great mystery. Moving on to the year 683, Warrior King. Pakal was a political ruler and living god of the Mayan city of Palenque. Dying at the age of 80 after 68-year reign, he transformed Palenque into a powerful city with new palaces and temples, including his own tomb, the Temple of Inscriptions. Next, in the year 690, Empress Wu. Wu Zetian became the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own name. She ruled from 690 to 705, but had also been the real power in Tang China during the reigns of her husband Gaozong and her son. Here she is. On to the year 700, end of a city. Teotihuacan in Mexico, once the greatest city in ancient America, collapsed, bringing 600 years of history to a close. Drought, crop failures, and famine probably weakened the city and left it vulnerable to attack. Let's read this little box over here. From the year 610 to 629 is the birth of Islam. Muhammad was a merchant in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, before he grew discontented and took up a life of contemplation. In 610, around age 40, he received a series of divine revelations and began preaching the message that there is one God, Allah. His revelations are contained in the Quran, which is for Muslims the direct word of God. The new religion that Muhammad taught was called Islam, meaning submission to God. And here's Medina and Mecca. You can see the Kaaba right there. The people of Mecca turned against Muhammad, and in 622 he fled to Medina. That journey marks the start of the Islamic era. In 629 Muhammad returned to Mecca, and today both cities are holy for Muslims. I'm not sure why my little stand here is squeaking, but it certainly is. What a night over here. So much chaos happening. Alright, moving on. We're in the year 700 to 800, starting off in the year 711. Muslims in Spain. Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Berber from North Africa, came ashore at Gibraltar at the head of a large Muslim army. Within a year, he had overrun all of Spain, except for a small kingdom of Asturias in the northwest. Oh, got some events right here, back to back. In the year 731, English historian Bede, a monk at Jarrow in northern England, wrote the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Bede, an outstanding scholar, has been called the father of English history. And then on to 732, the Battle of Tours. A Muslim army from Spain advanced as far as Tours in central France before being beaten by the Franks, led by Charles Martel, or Charles Martel, I don't know, Charles Martel. Though not a king himself, Charles Martel founded the Carolingian dynasty of Frankish kings. Let's head over here. Can you hear the train in the background? That's our public transit. 750 is Andean City. There's a couple things that happened in the year 750. Andean City. Tiwanaku, a city on the Altiplano of present-day Bolivia, was at its height. The Tiwanaku people built stone monuments and terraced the mountain slopes for farming. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the Abbasids. Abu al-Abbas, head of the clan descended from Muhammad's uncle, overthrew the Umayyad caliphs, rulers of Islam since 661. Only one member of the Umayyad dynasty, Abd al-Rahman, escaped. He fled to Spain and established an emirate at Cordoba. The new Abbasid caliph defeated a Chinese army at the Battle of Talas River near Samarkand in 751. What happens next? 786. Cultured Caliph. Harun al-Rashid became the fifth Abbasid caliph, the head of state. He made the Abbasid capital of Baghdad a center of learning and encouraged scholars to translate ancient Greek and Roman texts into Arabic. Some stories in the 1001 Nights relate to him. In the year 793, raiders from the sea. Vikings, warriors from Scandinavia, attacked and looted Lindisfarne Monastery in northeast England. The first recorded Viking raid, it came without warning and caused widespread horror and alarm. Then, in the year 797, Mother Love. Banished from her court in 790, When her son Constantine VI was proclaimed sole ruler, Irene returned in 792 to resume her position as co-ruler of the Byzantine Empire. In 797, along with the bishops and courtiers, she had her son blinded and declared herself empress. What a loving mother. So, we're going to read about from the year 748 to 814, Charlemagne. And I know his name is pronounced Charlemagne. Je parle français. I know how to say his name properly, but I use American English pronunciations, and here we call him Charlemagne. I guess it's like champagne, right? Anyway, Charlemagne, the grandson of Charles Martel, became the sole ruler of the Franks in 771. He was the greatest of the Frankish kings. Charlemagne means Charles the Great. In 30 years of campaigning, he doubled the size of the kingdom, conquering the Lombards of northern Italy and the Saxons of northern Germany. Although he encouraged learning, he never learned to read. Crowned as emperor. On Christmas Day 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as emperor in Rome. It was an unprecedented event. Charlemagne was the first emperor in the West for nearly 400 years. And he was a legendary hero. This medieval manuscript shows Charlemagne and his knights in pitched battle against the Muslims in Spain. One of Charlemagne's knights was the hero of the poem The Song of Roland, a popular romance in medieval times. So key dates in his life: the year 774, Charlemagne conquered the Lombards of northern Italy. In 778, his army was defeated at the Battle of Roncesvalles in Spain. In 804, the war against the Saxons came to an end, and in 814, Charlemagne died in his palace at Aachen, Germany. See, like, we don't have an American English version of Aachen, so that I can pronounce it that way. At least that's how I'm pretty sure it's pronounced. Anyway, moving on to the years 800 to 900. So starting in 802, we're heading down to Cambodia, the Khmer king. Cambodia's Khmer Empire was founded by Jayavarman II, who proclaimed himself king of the world. He would dominate this part of Southeast Asia for 500 years. Moving on down the timeline to 843, the Treaty of Verdun. Charlemagne's empire was split between his three warring grandsons. Charles the Bald ruled West Francia, which is now France. Louis ruled East Francia, which is now Germany. And Lothair ruled Lotharingia, the central region from the Netherlands to northern Italy. Then we move on to the year 850, where quite a bit happened, apparently. Let's see. Gunpowder. The Chinese invented gunpowder, an explosive mix of sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter. I almost said salt pepper. They used it to launch flaming arrows from tubes. Gunpowder did not appear in Europe for another 500 years. Then on the other side of the world, 850, Viking raids. Viking longships were raiding along the Atlantic coast and up rivers to attack towns and monasteries. Viking traders had settled in Dublin, Ireland, and warrior bands began to spend winters in England and France. Over the next 2 decades, Viking raids intensified. Then in 858, Clan Japan. There goes the train. I think it's a relaxing sound, but anyway. Ruling on behalf of his grandson, the child emperor Seiwa, Fujiwara Yoshifusa became regent. His Fujiwara clan was now the dominant power in Japan. And right here in the crease, in the year 869, the end of Tikal. The last known building was erected in Tikal. The city was abandoned about 50 years later, bringing an end to the Maya civilization in lowland Guatemala. Then in 882, Swedish Vikings. Oleg, a Rus chieftain, became ruler of Kiev and the Dnieper River. The Rus were Viking traders from Sweden who traveled down the rivers of Russia to the Black Sea. Some continued to Constantinople, where they served as bodyguards to the Byzantine Emperor. Let's read about Alfred the Great from 849 to 899. Alfred became King of Wessex, by then the largest of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of England, at a time when Danish Vikings looked set to take over. He succeeded in halting their advance by allowing the Danes to settle in northern and eastern England, an area that came to be known as the Danelaw. Wise ruler, Alfred built fortified towns to defend Wessex. Well educated for the time, he made laws and founded schools. Legends of Alfred. There are many colorful tales of Alfred. He's said to have spied on the Danes in their camp disguised as a minstrel. Another tells of how he was given shelter by a peasant woman who asked him to watch her cakes cooking, and he let them burn. Good one. Gold jewel. The inscription on this tiny gem of crystal and gold, known as the Alfred Jewel, says, "Alfred ordered me to be made." Alfred was here. So key dates. In 871, Alfred succeeded his brother as King of Wessex. In 877, the Danes attacked, forcing Alfred into hiding. In 878, Alfred defeated the Danes at Edington. And circa 888, Alfred and Guthrum, the Danish leader, divided England between them. And I suppose this would be how Scotland and Wales was formed, right? I mean, after many, 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 many years, but I suppose that's the start of those, like, cultures dividing up. Let's move on to the years 900 to 1000. In the year 911, Normandy on the map. Charles III, King of the West Franks, gave Rollo, a Viking leader, land at the mouth of the Seine River on the condition he give up raiding and become a Christian. The area came to be known as Normandy, or Land of the Norsemen. Let's head over to 929, Caliph of Cordoba. Abd al-Rahman III, Emir of Cordoba in Spain and descendant of the Umayyads, took the title of Caliph. He united all of Al-Andalus, or Muslim Spain, under his rule, halted the advance of the Christian kingdoms in the north, and rebuilt much of the great mosque at Cordoba, which is a gorgeous building. And then, in 930, the first parliament. Viking settlers in Iceland held their first Althing, an outdoor assembly that was open to all free men. The Althing is claimed to be the world's oldest parliament. Moving on to the year 960, another busy year. We've got Danish convert. Following the conversion of King Harald Bluetooth, Denmark became the first Viking kingdom to adopt Christianity. Harald built roads, bridges, and forts across Denmark. And I know someone's going to leave a comment being like, did you know? Yes, our Bluetooth technology is named after Harald Bluetooth. The Bluetooth symbol is his Viking symbol. 960, China reunited. The 60 years of chaos that had followed the fall of the Tang dynasty finally ended when an army general, Zhao Guanyin, seized power. He ruled as Taizu, the first emperor of the Song dynasty. The Song capital was at Kaifeng in the north of China. Heading on to the year 962, German emperor. Otto I, King of Germany, was crowned emperor in Rome, reviving the idea of a Western empire that had died with Charlemagne. Otto's empire came to be known as the Holy Roman Empire. Then, in the year 985, going to Greenland. Viking explorer Eric the Red persuaded settlers from Iceland to sail west with him to Greenland. The Viking colony on Greenland survived until around 1450. Just a lot longer than you'd think. A little farming community on Greenland. It's a bad idea. In the year 988, we have the baptism of Vladimir. Prince Vladimir of Kiev agreed to adopt the Greek Orthodox faith in return for marrying the sister of the Byzantine Emperor Basil II. His baptism sealed Russian ties with the Byzantine Empire and determined Russia's future religion. Let's see what's next. The years 1000 to 1100. What happened 1000 years ago? High-rise living. The Anasazi people of New Mexico were living in pueblos or villages, which consisted of apartment-like complexes and multi-roomed dwellings that were sometimes several stories high. The Anasazi built their houses from adobe, which is sun-baked mud. In the year 1002, we're in Vinland. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, may have been the first European in America. Sailing west from Greenland, he reached a place thought to be Newfoundland that he called Vinland. The name may have meant grapevine land or pasture land. In the year 1016, Danish rule. Canute, a Dane, was crowned King of England after defeating King Edmund Ironside. He then secured the throne of Denmark, ruling both countries for the next 20 years. I just realized I forgot a box back here. It was about Borobudur. Oh no. Well, maybe we'll go back to it at the end of the video. I apologize. I love Borobudur. It's so beautiful. 1021. Courtly Tale. Princess Murasaki Shikibu, oh, they spelled her name wrong, wrote The Tale of Genji, a story of love and intrigue set in the Heian imperial court. Considered by many to be the world's first full-length novel, it has about 400 characters, including the hero Prince Genji. Sorry, people walking around. Very late at night, oh well. In the year 1044, Burmese kingdom. Prince Anurata became the king of Bagan, a Buddhist kingdom on the Irrawaddy River in Burma that became very powerful during his reign. He built the golden Shwedagon Pagoda, said to house Buddha's tooth. Check this out. Incredible. I'm just gonna go back. I can't stop thinking about how I skipped a box. I skipped this box about Borobudur because we're reading about Alfred the Red. Real quick, since we're talking about temples, right? Borobudur in 825. The Temple of Borobudur in the Indonesian island of Java is the largest Buddhist monument in the world. It was built around 825 by the Sailendra dynasty, originally from Kalinga in East India. The temple was built in 3 tiers. Each of the open-work stupas, or the domed shrines, contains a seated statue of Buddha, and there are 504 Buddha statues in all. Okay, I feel better now. I would be thinking about the whole time if I didn't do that. Alright, back to 1053. Normans in Italy. A number of landless knights from Normandy went to Italy to seek their fortunes in the 11th century. One of them, Robert Guiscard, carved a power base for himself in southern Italy after winning the Battle of Civitate against the Pope. I hope that's how you say that. Between 1061 and 1091, the Normans conquered the Italian island of Sicily. Then, in the year 1071, Turkish victory. The Seljuk Turks inflicted a crushing defeat on the Byzantine army at the Battle of Manzikert before sweeping on to take most of Anatolia, which is Turkey, Syria, and Jerusalem. The Seljuks already controlled Persia and Iraq. And then on to 1095, the First Crusade. Pope Urban II called upon the knights of Western Europe to free Jerusalem from the Muslims. Fired by religious zeal and the prospect of booty, thousands took the cross. Let's read about the Normans conquering England from 1066 to 1087. In 1066, William, the Duke of Normandy, which is in northern France, conquered England after defeating Harold II. He imposed Norman rule throughout the country and gave the land to his leading barons, who built strong stone castles. The Domesday Book, a list of all the property in William's new kingdom, was compiled in 1086. The decisive battle. The Bayeux Tapestry, made around 1080, tells the story of William's victory at the Battle of Hastings on October 14th, 1066. Harold died on the battlefield. Here, Norman knights attacked the king's bodyguards. And the main players, we've got Harold II. Harold had become king on January 6th, 1066, after King Edward the Confessor died without an heir. And here's William I. William claimed that Edward had promised the throne to him. He became known as William the Conqueror. Alright, let's see what happens next in history. From the years 1100 to 1200. At 1113, Temple Mountain. The Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia was built by the Khmer King Suryavarman II. The largest religious structure in the world, it was designed to resemble the Hindu sacred mountain of Meru. Then in 1127, Southern Song. When nomads overran northern China and seized the Song capital of Kaifeng, a Song prince, Gaozong, escaped. He founded the Southern Song dynasty. Let's see what happens next. In 1150, Cahokia City. A city at Cahokia in the Mississippi Valley of North America may have held up to 30,000 people. At its heart was a massive earth mound topped by a wooden building, either a temple or a palace. It is one of more than 100 mounds built at Cahokia. In the year 1158, seat of learning, literally. The University of Bologna, Italy, was formally established, though its origins date back to 1088. Paris had a university by 1150 and Oxford by 1167. They developed out of cathedral schools where students would gather at the feet of a teacher. In the year 1170, unholy murder. 4 knights who claimed to be acting on behalf of King Henry II of England murdered Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Henry was angry with Thomas, his former friend and advisor, for putting the rights of the church above those of the crown. Thomas was made a saint in 1173. In 1175, Muslims in India. Muhammad of Ghur, an emir from Afghanistan, established a great Muslim empire in northern India. It broke up after his death in 1206, but his general, Qutb ad-Din Aibak, founded the first Sultanate of Delhi. Then, in 1192, the first shogun. Minamoto Yoritomo took the title of shogun, which means supreme commander. He was now the undisputed military ruler of Japan, and the emperor was reduced to a figurehead. I'm not going to skip this box about Saladin. From 1137 to 1193, Saladin, or Salah ad-Din in Arabic, was a great Muslim warrior. He began his career fighting for Nur ad-Din, the ruler of Syria. Having overthrown the Fatimid dynasty, Saladin used Egypt as his power base to attack the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem. Chivalrous leader. Saladin won fame for being generous to his enemies. When the Crusader Richard I of England lost his horse, Saladin sent him another. And the fall of Jerusalem. In July 1187, Saladin's army defeated the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin. Fought in blazing heat, Saladin went on to capture Jerusalem, prompting the Pope to launch the Third Crusade. Some key dates. We've got 1152. Saladin joined the service of Nur ad-Din. In 1171, Saladin overthrew the Fatimids and made himself Sultan of Egypt. In 1187, Saladin recaptured Jerusalem, ending 88 years of Crusader rule. And in 1192, Saladin and Richard signed a treaty reducing the Crusader kingdom. Is that his turban? That's so cool. That's neat. Alright, let's see what happens next in the world. Ooh, lots of extra pages. There we go. On to the years 1200 to 1300. Starting in 1204, Crusader Rampage. The Fourth Crusade never reached Jerusalem. Short of money, the Crusaders diverted to Constantinople, where a claimant to the throne promised to pay them if they helped him take power. They sacked the city and set up a Latin empire. The Byzantine Empire never fully recovered. In 1206, Mongol warlord Temujin, a chieftain from the steppes of Mongolia, succeeded in uniting all the Mongol tribes under his command. He took the name of Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler, before setting out on the first of his campaigns to conquer Asia. In the year 1209, War on Heretics. Pope Innocent III launched a crusade against the Albigensians, the name given to the Cathars, of southern France, who held religious views unacceptable to the church. I think it's Cathars. I think I was reading about them the other day. Anyway, King Philip II of France used the Albigensian Crusade as a way to impose royal authority in the south. Thousands died in the savage persecution that followed. In 1212, Spanish Reconquest. An army led by the kings of Aragon and Castile defeated a Muslim force at Las Navas de Tolosa. This marked a turning point in the struggle between Muslims and Christians in Spain. By 1248, most of Spain was in Christian hands. In 1215, we've got the Magna Carta. In England, a barons' revolt forced King John to sign the Great Charter, or Magna Carta. An important document in the history of human rights, Magna Carta stated that the king was not above the law. In 1265, resistance to royal power also led to the first English parliament that included commoners as well as nobles. King John was very famously considered the worst king of England ever, to the point where there will never be another royal named John who will take the throne. That name's like forbidden in the royal family now, ever since the 1200s, right? In 1242, Battle of the Ice. Alexander Nevsky, Prince of Novgorod in Russia, defeated an army of Teutonic Knights, which was a German military order. The battle was fought on a frozen lake in what is now Estonia. Let's see, moving on to 1270, heirs of Solomon. Yakuno Amlak became emperor of Ethiopia, restoring the Solomonid dynasty of Aksum. The Solomonid kings claimed they were descended from the son of the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Then on to 1271, Traveler's Tales. Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, set out on a journey into Asia. He was away for 25 years. After his return, he wrote a memoir describing his adventures. His book opened up the unknown world of Asia to Europeans. Let's head down to this box here and read about Great Zimbabwe from 1270 to 1450. Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a large empire in southern Africa, which had grown rich through its control of the trade in gold and ivory. The ruler and his entourage lived inside a walled palace called the Great Enclosure, with walls up to 36 feet high in places. The modern African country of Zimbabwe takes its name from this impressive site. Let's head on to the next year. There we go. 1300 to 1400. Sorry for the creepy spider there. Moving on to the year 1314, victorious Scots. Robert the Bruce, King of Scotland, defeated the army of King Edward II of England at the Battle of Bannockburn. His victory put an end to English attempts to rule Scotland. One story tells how Robert, at an all-time low, took inspiration from a spider. Watching it spin its web, he realized that with perseverance he could succeed too. Moving on to 1324, gunfire. Knowledge of gunpowder had reached Europe from China via the Mongols and Arabs, and cannons were used for the first time in Europe at the siege of Metz, now in eastern France. the coming of gunpowder would change the face of warfare. In 1325, fabled Timbuktu. Mansa Musa I, ruler of the gold-rich Mali Empire of West Africa, made the pilgrimage to Mecca. Under Mansa Musa, the Malian city of Timbuktu became a renowned center of Islamic scholarship and culture. Let's see, next we have over here my goodness, squeezed in here, 1346, Longbow victory. The 100 Years' War between England and France had broken out in 1337. King Edward III invaded France to pursue his claim to the French throne. He won a great victory at the Battle of Crecy, thanks to the deadly accuracy of the Welsh and English longbows. And in 1347, the Black Death. An epidemic of bubonic plague raged throughout Europe, killing 45% of the population in 4 years. Victims suffered terrible swellings and internal bleeding. People thought God had sent the plague as a punishment and did all they could to seek his forgiveness. There they go. In 1368, the brilliant Ming. Peasant-born general Zhu Yuanzhang overthrew the unpopular Mongol Yuan dynasty to proclaim himself emperor. He founded the Ming dynasty. Ming means brilliant in Chinese. Brilliant. And in 1389, the Battle of Kosovo. There we go. The Ottoman Turks defeated the Serbs at the Battle of Kosovo, although Sultan Murad I died in the fighting, as did the Serbian commander Prince Lazar. In less than a century, the Ottomans had expanded out of Anatolia to control most of the Balkans south of the Danube River. And up here, we've got an age of literature, same span 1300 to 1400. Literature flourished in 14th century Europe, especially in Italy. The greatest writer of the age was the poet Dante Alighieri, author of the Divine Comedy. Fellow poets Petrarch and Giovanni Boccaccio were also celebrated for their verse. Boccaccio's collection of tales, the Decameron, I'm not sure, greatly influenced the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales. I've never heard of this. I should look that up. Let's read about Dante's epic poem, the world's first fanfic. Dante holds a copy of the Divine Comedy, which he wrote between 1307 and 1321. The poem describes a visionary journey through hell, purgatory, which is the in-between place where dead sinners try to make amends, and heaven. And pilgrim stories. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer related the stories told by a group of pilgrims as he traveled with them to the shrine of Thomas Becket in Canterbury. Let's see what's next. 1400 to 1450. Let's start off with the box, because that starts in 1370 to 1405, and it's about Timur the Lame. Timur, or Tamerlane, was a war leader from Samarkand in Central Asia. He spread terror far and wide in a 20-year career that included the conquest of Persia, the near destruction of the Ottoman Empire, and the massacre of thousands of people in Delhi and Baghdad. He was heading for China when he died in 1405. Towers of Skulls. Timur is said to have made huge pyramids of the skulls of his victims, but despite his reputation for cruelty, he was a devout Muslim. He built many beautiful mosques and other buildings in his capital, Samarkand. Moving on to 1406, the Forbidden City. The Yongle Ming Emperor began building the Forbidden City in Beijing, a huge complex of nearly 1,000 buildings to house the imperial court. Enclosed by a moat and a high defensive wall, it was called the Forbidden City because only the emperor, his court, and servants were allowed to enter it without permission. Then in 1410, pitched battle. The Battle of Tannenberg was one of the largest cavalry battles of the Middle Ages. a huge army led by King Ladislaus Jagiello II of Poland and Lithuania defeated the Teutonic Knights, a religious order of knights that controlled the Baltic region. I'm like reaching back in my memory to remember how to pronounce this guy's name, but I've never seen it spelled like that, so I can't remember. Anyway, y'all know who I'm talking about. Moving on to 1422, Chinese explorer Jing He, a Chinese admiral, brought back giraffes from East Africa as a gift for the Ming Emperor. Between 1405 and 1433, he made 7 expeditions with his huge fleet of treasure ships and may have visited up to 30 countries. Yeah, the underrated Marco Polo of the East. He was a cool guy. 1431, French heroine. Joan of Arc, a young peasant girl, persuaded the Dauphin, or the son of the French king, to fight back against the English. She was captured and tried for heresy for claiming the saints spoke to her. Found guilty, she was burned at the stake. In 1434, African voyages. Sponsored by Prince Henry the Navigator, who set up a school of navigation, Portuguese sailor Gilles Eanes rounded Cape Bojador, a dangerous reef off West Africa that had challenged sailors before that time. The Portuguese developed a sturdy type of vessel, the caravel, for long ocean voyages. I've never heard of that guy either. So much to look up after this. In 1438, Inca ruler. High in the Andes of Peru, Pachacutec became the ruler of the Incas. He set about creating a great military empire that stretched for 2,500 miles from Ecuador to central Chile. And in 1446, Korean alphabet. Hangul, an alphabet with 14 basic consonants and 10 basic vowels, was introduced to Korea on the orders of King Sejong. Let's see this box about the 100 Years' War from 1415 to 1453. By 1415, the war that England and France had been fighting on and off since 1337 had all but ceased. Then England's King Henry V decided to start it again. He invaded France and won a spectacular victory, the Battle of Agincourt? Not sure. I always said Agincourt, but I don't think that's how you actually say it. Oh well. War maker. King Henry V reasserted the English claim to the French crown. And the end of the war. Here the French army besieges English-held Cherbourg. After Henry V's death in 1422, an English army occupied northern France. Joan of Arc rallied French resistance, and the English were expelled in 1453. And I think that's the end, because it was only going to go up to 1450, so that's the end for tonight. So next time we're going to read about exploring and reforming 1450 to 1750. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good